Hey, everybody. This is So Many Sequels, your book club for movies. I'm Josh.
I'm Garrett.
And I'm David.
Every time I mean to do like the So Many Sequels thing, and I forget.
Yes.
You could tell if you're watching the YouTube show from Garrett's background. That's not how it normally looks.
Nope.
Where's Mrs. Frankenstein?
Oh, she'll make an appearance. I rotate. Last week we had Michael Myers. This week we have Dracula, and then Joker. And next week we'll have Bride of Frankenstein. She'll be here next week, folks.
Excellent. See, I didn't know you had rotating audiences.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, that's fun.
They all kind of connect. We got monsters. You know, last week we had serial killers, and we had a serial killer. You know,
maybe
Bride
next
of Frankenstein
week.
Is just there.
Maybe next week, David and I can incorporate some spookiness into our backgrounds.
We don't have anything
here. I know. Need to get something scary. But yeah, So Many Scares is here. We've kicked off the month already with Final Destination, and now we're going to talk about David's pick, An American Werewolf in London. If you haven't hit subscribe yet on YouTube, go do that. Hit that subscribe button. Hit that little bell. I think it notifies people. I'm learning. And then if you prefer podcasting, we're also in every app. All the podcast apps.
Yeah.
We're in there. So search So Many Sequels.
Frankly, we're hard not to find.
Find us there. You know, people are saying they can't not find us.
Yes.
That we're everywhere.
Yes. They're listening to the pods. Yeah.
Exactly. We're shooting for 316 YouTube subscribers, and we're almost there. So go help us out. Hit that subscribe button. An American Werewolf in London. This was a first watch for all of us, I think. Right?
Yes.
Am I correct
Yep,
there?
it was.
David, you're going to tell us in a little bit why you picked it. But first, let's talk about what it's about, kind of how it did. American tourists, David and Jack, are not to be confused with our David. They're savaged by an unidentified vicious animal whilst hiking on the Yorkshire moors. Very specific description. Retiring to the home of a beautiful nurse to recuperate, David soon experiences disturbing changes to his mind and body. An American Werewolf in London. Did people go see this?
Yeah, this was actually a fairly popular movie. You're going to have to take into account a few different things. So it debuted August 21st, 1981. It opened in the number 2 spot with $3.7 million. That's about the equivalent of $13 million opening today. You have to remember that it was only in about 870 theaters, though, in the 1980s. We didn't quite have the theater saturation level that we have these days. The number 1 movie that weekend was Raiders of the Lost Ark, the classic Indiana Jones film, one of the other 1981 films that the only other 1981 film that we've reviewed for this podcast, which brought in $4.1 million in its 11th weekend. The number 3 movie was Arthur. At number 4, you had the first Monday, which is a pretty good. I
love Arthur.
There you go. Yeah, and that was in its 6th weekend, bringing in $3 million. At number 4, you had the first Monday in October, which is weird to release in August, but brought in $2.7 million. And then at number 5, you had Stripes, which was in its 9th weekend, bringing in $2.2 million, which is kind of an underrated, in my opinion, underrated Bill Murray and co movie.
Yeah.
The film would go on to make $30.5 million in the U.S. That's the equivalent of about $105 million in 2024 money. Box Office Mojo did not have good stats on this. It claims it only brought in $100,000 overseas. But according to Wikipedia and one source, BBC, reports that it brought in $32 million overseas for a worldwide total of $62 million. This is all on a budget that's estimated to be around $6 million or $5.8 million. In today's world, a $20 million budget and $105 million haul, that's pretty good. So it did pretty well. It was the number 23 movie of 1981 and the number 1 horror film of 1981. The number 1 movie in 1981 was the aforementioned Raiders of the Lost Ark, followed by On Golden Pond, Superman 2, Arthur again, and Stripes. Some other horror movies that came out back in 1981 were Halloween 2, Ghost Story, Friday the 13th Part 2, The Howling, Omen 3, The Final Conflict, and My Bloody Valentine. Little bonus detail I'm going to throw out there for you guys. This is one of 2 movies in 1981 to feature the Muppets, because the Great Muppet Caper came out that year. And at that, I'll turn it back to you, Josh.
I knew you'd mention it at some point. If not, immediately. We had Frank Oz was in the movie too.
He was in
Yes,
the
he
movie.
was.
He had a cameo as someone with the government.
Sam the
he was
Eagle. That's who he was. He was Sam the Eagle in this movie.
He was like from the embassy.
He was from the
American
embassy right before we see Miss Piggy
Mm-hmm.
on TV. So why did you pick this movie though?
So I struggle.
As never seen it.
Yeah, I've never seen it. I struggle with so many scares because I don't like being
But
scared.
we know.
I'm not a big fan of scary movies and being scared in general, but I respect that it's our tradition. And I want to pick movies that you guys will and the audience will respect. Like, I don't want to pick a movie and be like, ha ha, I picked a scary movie that's not scary. And there's a part of me that has a desire to watch like some of the classics that I've never seen. Plus, we've talked about before, we need to watch more movies from before 1990. Like we need to expand our movie horizons a little bit. So I racked my head over this for like a month or two, trying to figure out what I wanted to do. Incidentally, I was talking to my wife and I said, it's too bad there's not like a definitive, faithful version of Frankenstein. There's been several adaptations of Frankenstein, but none of them are like really that faithful to the book. And I wish there had been one. And I said, meanwhile, the Wolfman's got like 12 depictions in the last 10 years. And then it occurred to me, wait a minute, I should do a werewolf movie. That would be fun. And the first thing that came to my mind was the image of the American Werewolf transforming and like his hand getting longer, which we'll talk about more later. And I just knew that one hit all of the vibes that I wanted because from what I understood, it was a bit of a classic, a bit of a cult classic. It was a very popular movie of its time. And a lot of people respected its place in the horror genre. And it's kind of a horror comedy of sorts. So I thought, maybe we could do that. So that's why I picked it. I thought it would work.
Now, I did not expect there to be a comedy element for some reason. That was news to me. Did you know that, Garrett?
Yes, I knew there was a level of it.
Okay.
And, John Landis is pretty funny in of himself, so I'm not too surprised that it leaned into that a lot.
Yeah. What was your reaction to this? Kind of first thoughts?
I found it enjoyable. I appreciated the classic. I do think that it does a really good job of giving you that scene that you want. You want to see them turn and this is iconic. It really is the most. I mean, the makeup in this movie is iconic. I know David will talk about it in a little bit, but it won the Academy Award for makeup, and that for me is what stood out. I mean, it was so wonderfully done, especially every time the ghost of Jack would come back and his whole face was just mangled. And like, there was one part where his flesh was just like slingling. And it was so gross in a wonderfully done way. And so that, and then the transformation, man, those scenes really stood out. It's definitely a very 80s movie, which is not a bad thing. It's just definitely a movie you can be like, oh, yep, that was made in the 80s. I don't know when, but sometime in the 80s. But it also had like a lingering of like 70s kind of storytelling. I appreciated the scene that they set. The story was so quick and the ending was so abrupt that things kind of felt a little all over the place sometimes. But overall, it was a fun watch. And again, I can't say enough about the effects that they use. That truly makes this movie. Otherwise, I don't think it would be as good.
Yeah, what do you think, Josh?
That's fair. I found it enjoyable too. It doesn't overstay its welcome, which is important because I think it very easily could have. It's a short movie. There are parts where I was like, what is happening? So I can't I didn't love it. The best part, bar none, totally agree, is the transformation scene. That was actually really cool to see. And I would love to, I need to YouTube a making of, because I just really am curious how that scene was filmed. I read that it took a long time, that they spent about a week just on that transformation scene. It involved a lot of prosthetics, and it was just very difficult because of the amount of time it took to get the actor, I forgot his name already, the actor into that makeup. Mm-hmm. It was so much of it. And I'm sure that's why there was also so much Frank Oz going on. All the puppetry, got to be a reference, right? Yeah. It's got to be a little bit. So that stuff was fun. The world is a little weird, I found it. I just thought that I don't know. Are werewolves real? Like, are they aware of werewolves in this world? Because it seemed like people are just kind of like about it.
Yeah, it seemed like a fantasy, but some
Yeah.
people believed it.
Like they knew it could happen. And meanwhile, I feel like in real life, the reaction would be a lot crazier. So there's some of that going on, but all the while I enjoyed it. I thought the two leads had a good little dynamic. I was super thrown that one of them was going to be dead the whole movie, like playing an undead version of themselves. That was pretty wild.
I was happy to see them back though.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I also kind of enjoyed. You know what? Actually, I'm gonna stop talking for a little bit because I need to percolate thoughts.
Okay,
David, you tell us your reactions.
So it was not entirely what I was expecting. It was a lot more patient with the violence. It was a lot drier with the humor. I really expected it to be kind of gag heavy. Like I kind of expected these two Americans in England to just kind of be like total a-holes and be like really obnoxious Americans. And then I kind of expected it to be really bloody and gruesome. And there is blood and there is some gruesomeness, but like a lot of it happens like very quickly and then like it cuts to something different. Like there's a lot of sequences where you don't get like to watch somebody get just totally torn apart. You know, it's very sudden and then like immediately cutting to kind of juxtaposing it with something else. So you'd see like the werewolf attack somebody and then you'd see like wine being poured, or you'd see like the werewolf about to attack and then it cuts to a lion at the zoo, you know, things like that. And so
I laughed out loud at that. The lion specifically.
Yeah.
I hope that was an intentional comedic choice because I thought that was so unexpected.
Yeah.
I was like, a lion.
What? Because I thought the lion was there for a second. I was like, there's a lion here too now? Like I was really worried this guy's super dead.
Yeah.
And so the characters were smart, but they weren't like alienating or any way. They felt real. It felt very natural. At the same time, it was like you said, very 80s. They were the way they spoke about stuff was very what feels like old fashioned now. The film's biggest moment, as you talked about, is that transformation scene, and they don't like just blow it immediately. They really stoke like it's an hour before that happens, and so they really stoke it with the mental anguish that he's going through, these dreams. It kind of reminded me, I don't know why I keep remembering this. It kind of reminded me of like modern horror movies where there's a lot of fake outs of like dreams, hallucinations. Smile had a lot of these where it's like, you're like, you know, you're always suspecting that they might be dreaming this scenario. And there were a lot of those kind of weird dream sequences. You know, I did not expect the movie to feature two kids getting gunned down while watching the Muppets. That was that was surprising. But to their credit, they didn't like show people getting gunned down. They would just show like, here's the person going, and then they'd show the guns going off, and then they would just be dead later. You know, you didn't like watch somebody get blown apart. But yeah, a lot of these hallucinations, and then the makeup effects were great. The transformation scene was amazing. You really only get to see the monster a little bit, and I was kind of hoping for more of that by the end. I was like, just let me see the monster, man. Come on, let me see it. But yeah, I also, just to sum up, I did enjoy this, and I'm kind of glad that we crossed it off the list.
Yeah. There's so much weirdness in the movie, and I think that's what I'm trying to like figure out how to say is like how much of it is funny and how much of it am I like misinterpreting as not good? You know what I mean?
Some of it,
because the first scene I wanted to talk about that really like sucked me out because I just started thinking too much was it like one of the longest and weirdest and least sexy sex scenes I've ever seen. Where I just pulled out of the movie and was wondering like, is this funny? Or is this
that's
bad?
the 80s. No, that's just the 80s. There was always you got to have
like
what is it? The
the
obligatory boob shot or whatever.
Moon
all
dance?
the rules or whatever.
It was.
Oh
not
man,
sexy.
you don't like them getting it on to Moon Dance? Incidentally,
did not.
I love all the Moon songs in this movie.
Oh well, no, that part is
Yeah.
funny.
Yeah.
Because the next thing I was going to discuss was getting like almost all of Bad Moon Rising before
Yes.
this really scary transformation.
Exactly. You get Bad Moon Rising and he's just milling about the apartment for the entire song. And I think it goes to they didn't really have a lot of stuff for the movie to do, and so a lot of it is just kind of like pacing itself until this like final 30 minutes of action and gore and excitement to an extent. And so like it felt like that first hour they were really pacing it out, and they're like, well, let's just have him mill about the house while listening to Bad Mood Rising.
Yeah, I was wondering. I was like, what is he doing?
And then he transforms to they play Blue Moon again, which they open the movie with a version of Blue Moon. They play Blue Moon again. He transforms to that. I like that. And then we get who sings the last? So at the end we get another version of Blue Moon. We get the Marcel's doo-wop version with the ba, the bang, to bang, to take us into the credits. And that was. So I like all the uses of Moon songs, but Moon Dance and the sex in the shower, followed by, yes, you said prolonged sex.
It was another one of those instances where like jump cuts were like startling me a little bit because she said something along the lines of, did she say she usually has one night stands?
She did. She says she's been with like 11 men and 3 of them were one night stands.
And he's like, eh. And then she's like, do you want to watch telly while I shower? And then boom, they're sexing
in the shower. Which is
cutting to opposite expectations.
That again, this movie feels like if Animal House met a werewolf. Like that's the kind of vibe that I get from it.
Mm-hmm.
And
that makes sense.
And John Landis worked on Animal House, and so you have that feeling of that 70s, 80s, early, especially trying to just kind of work some of this in because you can. It definitely feels like, oh, we're going to have a horror movie. So again, you go back to Scream and you got to have the obligatory tit shot, right? So like that's what that is. That's in there for that purpose. Probably a trope of all of those horror movies worked into this kind of satire-y, half serious horror movie.
Mm-hmm.
It was, some of the whole back and forth with the nurse and stuff, like I like that, but what I actually liked about the story aspect was the conflict between the London storytelling and his storytelling. I like the idea that this town in London is aware that there's a werewolf and that they are protecting themselves and that it's fine for this, but they certainly don't want the masses to know about it. And so when they escape, for them to totally be like, nah, he was attacked, there's a dude killed right here. And for him to be going through that back and forth of like, no, I like that. I don't think they fleshed it out as much as they could have or should have. Again, that's not how movies were made back then. This movie does live and breathe on the build towards the transformation. And they know they put so much work into that. That's what they're getting towards. Because, you didn't have as much money back then. You got to make something stand out. And this is the thing that stands out. So, again, it's not the greatest when it comes to the story pieces, but there are little nuggets there that I do appreciate.
No, and while we're talking about sort of the things to appreciate, I do appreciate, I think his name is Griffin Dunn. I think that's who plays Jack.
Yeah.
And he said John Landis, he said he had to really come to grips with the direction he was given, which he said, look, you're going to be a corpse and you're going to be like getting intensely more gross as the movie goes on. But I want you to play it as normal and as cool as possible. Like, do not act like a zombie. Just act like yourself. Act like a normal person. And I think that that's a great direction choice because he just comes across so matter of fact. He's just like, look, David, this is a bad deal. I know, but you just got to kill yourself. It was really rough. And it's juxtaposed with how awful he looks is how normal he's acting. And I just kind of like that. It's very, it reminded me of like sort of the way that they did that in Beetlejuice, like everybody sort of acting like it's their normal lives, even though they have like half a head or, they're split down the middle or whatever, but everybody's just acting like this is just normal, how you do it, So
I had a moment watching this and learning about it where the best way I could explain it, particularly for Garrett, is there's a show we used to watch where the character would like see something and then would flash a bunch of things in his head and he would see what's going to happen and things like that.
The Dead Zone.
And that is when I found out that one of the stars of this movie is connected to that damn Menendez brothers case that I have been sucked into since like 2 weeks ago when I told you all about the Netflix show I'm watching.
Yeah.
Griffin Dunn, his father, Dominic Dunn, was a Vanity Fair reporter who wrote the article that is credited for like influencing public perception toward these brothers during this case. And I was like, how
Wow.
this movie came out before the case?
Like, how are these things lining up?
How is everything lining up? It's a loose connection, but it still freaked me out. And because I'm watching the show, and I just found out about this guy because freaking Nathan Lane is playing him on the Netflix show. And then I see this, and I go, what? So anyway,
That's crazy. Wow.
yeah, I plugged into the intersect for a second.
Yeah. But I love that take on the character. I love when the other victims are in the theater with him, and they're all just like, "I'm not that happy to meet you," and they're all rude. But that couple over there is like, "Yeah, hi," and they're like, "Oh, you could drown yourself," like they're very positive.
Oh, all
very
the
positive
victims.
corpses.
Is that what you're talking about? Yeah,
the
That
other
was-
victims in the theater.
That's such a weird dynamic too that I like a lot. Though I like that the movie has him interact so much with the undead as kind of like them saying, "You're kind of one of us, and you need to accept it." Okay, two more funny parts that also made me wonder: is this funny or is this 1981 or whatever year it was? I'm dying when he's fully nude, being like, "Come here, balloon boy." And I was stunned when he came out butt ass naked to him.
Yeah.
Like
And
he
just-
covered himself, but you
And
know
took
what I
his
mean?
balloons.
He took his balloons. That's a funny scene. A naked man stole my balloons. Hilarity.
It
That
was
was
pretty
funny.
funny. It walked the line between that's inappropriate, but like, we all know the scenario he's in. He just de-transformed from werewolf, and he's very naked. He's naked a lot in this movie.
Yeah, I
He's
mean,
naked
listen,
a lot
it
in this movie,
happened.
which makes sense.
It happened to Mark Ruffalo when he flew out of the sky as the Hulk. He was naked too. He ripped out through all his clothes. Sometimes it happens.
Yeah. And then I know this was funny. When he's trying to turn himself in for the murders and the cop would arrest him. So then he just starts saying horrible things about the queen.
he's like the Queen's a man, and all
He
kinds.
says terrible things that I won't
Winston
repeat.
Churchill was a bad guy or something like that. He said just saying.
Oh,
all
it
kinds
was
of
worse
mean
than
stuff.
that.
It was.
He says terrible things and they're still like, nah.
Nah.
But no, that's the point where he's like, all right, come with me.
Yeah, he starts shouting a couple other obscenities. It draws a crowd.
Yes, he
Assault
says
the
like
queen.
he says like all of George Carlin's bad words. I was dying at that scene.
Yes.
Yes, because it just I told you about that BBC article I read, and he talked about how the film, watching it in the 2020s feels weirdly to him. So this is from a British reviewer, said to him, watching the movie again in the year 2022 or 2023 feels weirdly prescient to like Brexit, because you have those people, they're very weird about him being a foreigner, being an American. Kind of off about it. Then you kind of have this like really, like there's like this obviously this elite class structure that you see with some of the victims, and they're very like posh and well-to-do. He said he laughed out loud when that one British guy in the subway was like, "We're not amused, and I will be making a call to the police." And it's like he's like, but he also said that he wonders if it's just if like Landis just kind of felt that from being like shooting in England or something, or if it's just this thing of like, as when you live in a country, you have a certain perception of what your society's like, but when an outsider goes and they just like kind of portray you from what they see, sometimes it's more honest than you want it to be. Sometimes it's more true than you want it to be, the outside presentation. So interesting detail from that particular review.
Yeah. It's a movie, that's for sure. I don't know if there's any other parts that really stuck out to me. You guys got anything?
I was going to talk about the ending because to
Let's
me,
do
the
it.
ending
Let's talk
was
about
just,
that ending.
Like it just stopped. I mean, like it was
It
just
does.
over. It was like a
over.
blackout sketch or something.
Yeah.
Like it just all of a sudden was like, okay, over. And I was like,
Blue moon.
oh, it was so crazy. Like it truly threw me for a loop. And I don't know if I wanted more or if it was just that way that it ended that just was like, oh, what is happening?
It is like a very like, and I mean, honestly, we're 2 for 2 now with blackout endings, with sudden blackout endings, Final Destination. And then this, I don't know how The Sixth Sense ends, but
Doesn't end with a blackout. Well,
but
I don't know. I watched it like this, so all of it was a blackout.
So we'll see how this rest of this year goes. But yeah, it is kind of a sudden end because, like, I guess, and they're like, there's nothing else to do. He's spoiler alert, he's dead.
He did.
And so like there was like, what are we gonna do? Have them like talk about it for a while? Nah, just end the movie.
Yeah,
Right. He
Hit the
attacks
Marcells.
everybody, and they ultimately kill him. That's how that would happen, I guess.
that's true.
And then they move on.
Do you guys like those kind of endings? Though it's kind of like cut to black ending.
Not in this case.
Not in this case, but sometimes it can work.
Yeah,
I don't
one of the
think it worked
movies.
for this one.
One of the more recent movies where it worked for me was we've talked about this many times, but is the Barbarian, which just sort of suddenly ends.
Yeah,
Just sort of suddenly ends there, and I like that. The only other thing I want to talk about this movie, and I've already mentioned it a few times before, but if you look in the credits, you will see credits for Kermit the Frog and Miss Piggy, and they're credited as himself and herself, which I love. I love that they're credited as real people.
Right, because that tells me that Kermit and Miss Piggy, like that's part of their official filmography.
It is. It's listed.
Like that's canon because it's in there.
But again, they only appear on television, which is very interesting. Now, Frank Oz does appear in the movie, as we mentioned earlier, as a member of the American Embassy, and I just love him being sort of incredulous and yelling at David as he's in the hospital. But he's like, "Sir, you have to listen. You have to do it. We're telling you," or something like that. He's like, "Puh," and he like storms off. It's very like a mix of Fozzie Bear and Sam Eagle. He's like,
"Yeah,
children today, they don't want to do anything. They don't care when you try to help." And then he like storms off, and I was like, "Love it, love it."
Love it. There's no reason why they're not making a Muppets version of this right now. I'm telling you guys, Bob Iger's just sitting on the Muppets. He's just sitting on them.
An American Muppet in London.
They're just sitting there doing nothing.
Every time they could listen, the Muppets could have a whole Halloween series where they do Frankenstein, where they do werewolf, they do all the monsters as Muppets, and that would be a home run because their best movies are where they adapt things that are real, like that. Like Treasure Island is by far their best movie.
Yeah, and A Christmas Carol. Yeah,
I don't want
Christmas Carol, yes.
I don't want to do a Muppet podcast, but I just want to throw out this one thing that I feel like if I were in the boardroom, I'd say it. Guys, we make a lot of money on a lot of things. The Muppets, maybe they don't make us a lot of money, but we're going to make the shit anyway. We're going to take a loss on Muppets. And it's just how it's going to be.
What we'll lose in money, though, we will make up for in happiness.
Enjoy. Exactly.
You know what? In equity with our audience, because they will love it.
You keep making Marvel movies so that you can keep making failed Muppets projects that I enjoy.
The one for them, that's the Marvel movies. The one for you, that's the Muppet movie.
That's all I want. That's all I want.
Yeah, no, for sure. More Muppets. Anyway,
all right.
That's all I got. I think I got nothing else to say.
All right. Let's get into our final thoughts and ratings then. David, it was your pick, so why don't you start off with your rating of An American Werewolf in London?
So this was pretty cool. This was pretty cool to cross off my list. It is much more mature than I anticipated. I kind of thought it was going to be a bit more juvenile, but it wasn't. It was very nice. It wasn't mega scary, nor was it like mega funny. It was dry and it was tense at times. But a very good film. I don't know that I would rewatch it again. We don't talk about this a lot, but kind of this barrier I put on rewatchability is where the 4-star range comes in. I don't know if I would necessarily watch this again, so I'm going to give it 3.5 stars. Pretty good.
Okay. Garrett, what do you think?
I think I definitely understand why this is a cult classic. It doesn't surprise me one bit why this has an audience that is ravenous over it. And to me, having seen, not all of, but several werewolf movies, I do think that this has got the most iconic transformation scene in any of them, even more the original. That's more, it's so old that what it was doing for the time revolutionized things. But this one, I don't think it's been bested yet. I think that people have leaned too much into the CG of it all and have forgotten the practical effects. And so what this does and why it stands out, it really is wonderful at it. And so I agree, David, it's not quite a 4-star movie, but for what it is and where it lives is 3.5 stars.
I think that, I don't know that there's a lot of better werewolf movies that have come around. Really hopeful for Wolfman coming up here pretty soon. The teaser trailer's out now. We talked about that last week a little bit. So What it does really well is that transformation, which I think is key to any kind of Wolfman, werewolf movie. Some pieces of it don't work for me. It's not super scary. It's not super funny. But I can see maybe at the time that the some of the transformation and werewolf effects and even some of like the zombie effects could have been scary for that audience. So I could see it being a little spooky. I don't know though, again, if I'd go back to watch it. So I'm gonna go teensy bit lower at 3
Okay.
for me.
Ooh, that makes the Letterboxd game going to be really interesting.
It could be interesting here. Yeah, we had a change in the leaderboard last week, correct?
I believe so. I think Josh, you go first now. Let me double check these stats here real quick. And we're dead tied. Garrett, since you won last week, we'll let Josh go first with his. You guys are tied, but you won the most recently, so we'll go to Josh.
Valid. Well, before I do that, I will read some of the most popular reviews from Letterboxd. You can follow all of us there. It's the best social media app for movies because there's no BS, just movie reviews. That's what everybody loves. All right, here we go. 4 stars. A mad dog in my nonstop orgy palace. It's more likely than you think. 5 stars. So it just ended like that for real with that song?
That's what I'm saying.
3 stars. Why have only one version of Blue Moon in your film when you can have 3 instead? And then finally, 4 stars. A naked American man stole my balloons.
Yep.
That is probably the most
all you need to
iconic
know.
quote from this movie. So that's what we have to work with. I think that, ooh boy, I really don't know where it could land. So I feel like I'm a shot in the dark a little bit. I'm gonna guess 3.3.
Okay.
3.3.
3.3. Garrett?
Wow. You and I are going to have a big range because I've heard about this movie for a while, and I remember it being talked about on like VH1 I Love the 80s. And that leads me to believe that it's got some, again, that cult audience is strong. And I don't think it's going to be at a 4, but I do think it's going to be high. I'm going to go with like a 3.7.
Ooh, okay. That's about where I wanted to hit too. I'm going to say 3.6. I'm just going to aim a little lower.
So we got a 3.6, a 3. What'd you say, Garrett? 7?
3.7.
And then a 3.3 for me. Yeah, I may be way off with this one. Let's see. An American Werewolf in London. Ooh, we do not have a direct hit. So no double points today. I can confirm I was way off, so it's not me. This movie's at a 3.8, and that's going to make Garrett the closest.
Hey,
by 1.
there you go.
0.1. Respect it. Not for me, but that's okay. Not a 3.8 for me.
No, but there's probably plenty of nostalgia for this movie.
Yeah.
Probably a lot of people. This was their definitive werewolf horror movie, I bet. So I can respect that. And it had one thing to do, and it did it really well. So
that's true.
I mean, I bet you that stuff really stands out to people when they rate this.
Yeah.
So
4.5 star transformation.
So that moves Garrett up to 15, Solo in number 2. So it's now Josh 14, Garrett 15, me 18. But I haven't had a win since White Men Can't Jump. So, I mean, with quite a few movies left to go in the year, it's anybody's race, anybody's game.
It's still anybody's game. That's right. All right. Well, that is all for us on this episode of So Many Sequels. We've got more scares coming up this month. So be sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel or in your favorite podcast app to keep up with new episodes, reviews, and our updates. You can also follow us on Instagram at So Many Sequels Pod. We post our episodes there. We post what we're going to be talking about there. We post our polls there so you guys can vote for our fan picks when that comes up later in the month. And then if you really want to get involved, Patreon, So Many Sequels, you can join us there and you'll get access to our Discord. Finally, head to SoManySequels.com. We've got past episodes you can listen to. We will be back next time with another So Many Scares movie. Bye.
Bye. Ow.